Hey there, and welcome to exercise number 81. If you want to solve this exercise for yourself, then click on the link in the description. If not, keep watching and we're going to solve it together. In this exercise, we need to write a function named checkSettlesInTime that receives two parameters. The first one is a promise, and the second one is a number representing milliseconds, and we're going to call this one maxTime. The function should return another promise that we resolve with one of two values. Either true if the received promise as parameter, so this one here, settles before maxTime milliseconds, or false if the received promise takes longer than maxTime milliseconds to settle. And what does settle mean? Well, settle means that the promise is either resolved or rejected. Below we have an example, so let's look at that. I think it's going to make things a lot more clear. So we have here promise 1 is a new promise, and if we look at the code, this promise resolves after 250 milliseconds. Then we have promise 2 that rejects after 2.5 seconds, right? So 2500 milliseconds. And then we're going to call checkSettlesInTime of promise 1, so this is the first parameter, and then we pass it 500. And the result is going to be true because promise 1 settles before 500 milliseconds have passed. In the second example though, where we pass promise 2 and 1000 milliseconds, the return or the resolved value is going to be false. Why? Because promise 2 doesn't settle before 1000 milliseconds have passed. Actually, if we look at it, it settles after 2500 milliseconds have passed. So it's clear that 2500 is bigger than 1000, so the result should be false. Now that we've read the description, let's go here into the right side, into the code area, and start solving the exercise. Now, the first thing I want to do is let's actually return a new promise. So we're going to need to do return new promise. And here the promise constructor is going to get a callback that's going to get two callbacks as parameters, resolve and reject. Now, this promise will need to resolve two, either true if the promise that we have as parameter finishes before maxTime, or false if it doesn't. So let's do the false one first because that's easier. Because I can do here a timeout and I'm going to say, hey, if more than maxTime milliseconds have passed, then I want to resolve to false. So we create a new promise that waits maxTime milliseconds. If those have passed, okay, that's false. That's clear. Now we need to see how long does it take for this function to resolve. And actually we don't really care how long it takes because a promise can only be resolved once. So if this one calls, then the other code, if this code runs, then the promise won't resolve again. So we can do here is promise dot then, because this is a promise. Or actually, I don't even care about then. I can do dot finally. Can we do that without the catch? I think I do. Let's actually do a catch here as well. So in case this promise fails, I'm just gonna do a catch and let's do console.error just so we have it here. But we care about this finally branch. So we say when this promise settles, so it's either resolved or rejected, I wanna resolve to true. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, there's no code here that verifies, how much time it took and so on. And you might be thinking, why don't we do something like now, date.now, and then when it ends, we do, let's say, let duration is date.now minus now, and if duration smaller than max time, we do this or we do that. So you might be wondering why we don't do like a code like this. And the reason is, as I mentioned earlier, a promise only resolves once. So if this code runs, yeah, we don't care that we resolve here as well. It's not going to do anything. And if this code runs first, then this one isn't going to do anything. So we're safe. Now, before we submit our solution, let's actually test our code. So I'm just going to copy the code here. And let me just put it here. And we should see true and false. And then undefined. Undefined? Why do we get undefined? Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense because of this console error. So I think if I comment this, yeah, because the second promise catches and it rejects with nothing. So let's say some error. And then we should get some error after, yeah, 2.5 seconds. But you see, each promise resolved resolves just once. So we can write this code like this without needing to handle timestamps and so on. So this being said, let's test our solution. And voila, it works. Cheers and see you in the next one.